concept of cosmic religion. We've already discussed at some length in Lecture 12 Einstein's long and complicated relationship with the Zionist movement, and mention has been made of his becoming more aware of his own Jewish identity, especially when he first encountered the large and diverse Jewish communities in Prague and Berlin in the 1910s. Now we look a bit more within Einstein's soul, as it were, to measure the effect of such experiences on Einstein's self-understanding as a Jew. Larger issues about transcendence have also been touched upon, as when we discussed Einstein's tendency to seek a refuge from the merely personal in the scientific work through which he explored nature's laws. We've also discussed some of the specific thinkers from whom Einstein drew in shaping this part of his worldview, such as Spinoza and Schopenhauer. In this lecture, we'll explore those influences more fully as well, with the specific aim of understanding their contributions to Einstein's sense of the spiritual in human experience. One important result of these reflections should be to reinforce strongly our sense of Einstein, the whole person, our sense of Einstein as someone for whom all aspects of his life and thought are interrelated. We'll find that Einstein's moral sense and his lifelong commitment to social justice share deep spiritual roots with his understanding of what science is and of the role that science should play in human experience. The concept of the spiritual that emerges won't be that of any of the standard established religions. What Einstein called cosmic religion, though not wholly original with Einstein, bears further study as still a largely original contribution that Einstein made to yet another domain of inquiry. We've spoken of Einstein the physicist, Einstein the philosopher, and Einstein the humanitarian. We'll now find ourselves speaking of Einstein the theologian, however surprising that might seem. As we discussed way back in Lecture 1, Einstein was born in 1879 into a Germany where Jews had only recently won full civil rights, enabling them to move out of the ghetto into new careers in law, medicine, business, and the academy, and into the mainstream of German economic and cultural life. Prejudice had not gone away, however, and there were still powerful social impediments to advancement, which is why many ambitious Jews converted to Catholicism or Protestantism, or at least shed many of the trappings of Orthodox Jewish religious ritual. After emancipation, assimilation was the route chosen by many middle-class Jews, as was the case in Einstein's immediate family. This is why Einstein grew up without an especially vivid sense of his own Jewish identity. The young Einstein lived in a world where strict Jewish ritual was not observed, and religion was not emphasized. He attended a Catholic elementary school in Munich, and he's reported to have experienced an intense but brief period of religiosity as a young child, but it seems to have left little trace. Life as a student in the bohemian atmosphere of Zurich in the 1890s surely only reinforced Einstein's lack of attachment to traditional Judaism. The values he would have imbibed were more those of the Swiss Ethical Culture Society, which drew its membership heavily from among assimilated Jews, and in which Einstein's patron, Gustav Meyer, played a prominent role, as we learned in Lecture 12. Earlier, we also discussed the fact that Einstein really only began to see himself as a Jew when, first in Prague in 1911 and 1912, and then in Berlin after 1914, he found himself in cities with large, thriving Jewish populations, and his growing fame brought him into touch with major Jewish cultural institutions. Berlin after World War I affected him deeply in this way, as Orthodox Jewish refugees from the East flowed into the city, bringing with them a more traditional form of Jewish religious practice. When the Jews were made the scapegoat for Germany's failure in World War I, many assimilated German Jews themselves deflected some of the blame onto the recently arrived, poorer, Yiddish-speaking Orthodox Jews. Einstein, alert to prejudice of every kind, did not follow suit. We also talked about the phenomenon of Einstein himself and the physics of relativity being attacked in the early 1920s in the name of supposedly pure and authentic German physics. It was at this time, in 1921, that Einstein threw his support to the Zionist movement, accompanying Chaim Weizmann on a visit to the United States to raise funds for the planned Hebrew University of Jerusalem. By the late 1910s, therefore, Einstein's sense of Jewish identity had become an important part of his sense of self, though this loyalty, no more than any other, did not trump his commitment to a universal human community. But what does it mean to say that Einstein now thought of himself as a Jew? What sense of Jewishness is involved here? Was it just an ethnic identity? It surely wasn't the Jewishness of the synagogue, or a Jewishness that observes the high holy days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. As Einstein himself explained, what he came most to value in his Jewish heritage was its emphasis on morality and the life of the mind. For example, appearing at a meeting to raise funds for Jewish refugees in London's Royal Albert Hall in October 1933, Einstein remarked, "The value of Judaism lies exclusively in its spiritual and ethical content and in the corresponding qualities of individual Jews. For this reason, from olden times to now, study has rightly been the sacred endeavor of the capable ones among us." Why did Einstein come to view an emphasis on morality and the life of the mind as the valuable legacy of Judaism? I'm not entirely sure, but I'm reminded of the fact that morality and learning were also the aspects of Jewish culture still celebrated within the ethical culture movement that Einstein, the university student in Zurich, knew through his patron, Gustav Meyer. From a young age, therefore, Einstein might well have understood the Jewish tradition mainly from this perspective. During Einstein's Berlin years, and later in the United States, his Jewish friends and acquaintances tended to be people who shared his moral and rationalist appreciation of Judaism. One example from Berlin is the neo-Kantian philosopher Hermann Cohen, who wrote in 1919 of Judaism as the, quote, religion of reason. In the United States, the leader of the Reform Judaism movement, Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, became a collaborator with Einstein in many initiatives. A profound moral sense is woven deeply into the Jewish tradition. Peace, justice, charity, and benevolence are all emphasized in both the Bible and the rabbinic texts. But the tradition also recognizes the complexity of the moral life. Aaron the peacemaker is contrasted with a stern, uncompromising younger brother, Moses, who said, "Let justice pierce the mountain," meaning that peace must sometimes yield for justice to be achieved. That's a lesson that Einstein took to heart, as we've already seen. Could it be then that it wasn't just an emphasis on morality that Einstein drew from Judaism, but also this sense of moral complexity? Einstein's respect for the complexity of the moral life was nowhere more on display than in his complicated relationship with the Zionist movement. Fearful of the consequences of extreme nationalism, Einstein was always careful to explain, as noted before, that he endorsed cultural, not national Zionism. We also noted Einstein's work on behalf of peace and understanding between Jews and Palestinian Arabs, and his politely declining the invitation to succeed Chaim Weizmann as president of Israel in 1952. Still, Einstein's ultimate loyalty to his Jewish heritage was unmistakable, as evidenced by such things as his tireless work on behalf of Jewish refugees from Nazism and his support of cultural institutions like the Hebrew University. That his legacy as a Jew would long be remembered was guaranteed by his stipulating in his will that after the death of his surviving stepdaughter Margot and his longtime secretary Helen Dukas, his papers and his library should become the property of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where they rest secure to this day, consulted by scholars from around the world. The Einstein who prized mainly the moral and intellectual heritage of Judaism was not a practicing Jew. He did not observe Jewish ritual, and he never joined a Jewish congregation. He was respectful of those with conventional religious convictions, but could not bring himself to participate in any organized form of religion. And he said on many occasions that he could not bring himself to believe in an anthropomorphic or personal God. And yet, at a comparatively young age, Einstein seems to have developed an attitude toward nature itself, or rather toward nature in its law-governed aspect, that can only be described as spiritual or religious. It was an attitude of awe and humility in the face of the riddle of the universe, and an attitude of wonder and delight when human intellect manages to figure out even just some small part of the riddle. It was this attitude toward nature that Einstein came to call cosmic religion. As Einstein himself often said, if he believed in any God, It was the God of the 17th century Dutch Jewish philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza's God was a metaphysical principle best understood by contrast with the metaphysics of Spinoza's rationalist predecessor, the French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes posited three ultimate realities: mind, matter, and God. The essential attribute of mind, for Descartes, was that it could think. The essential attribute of matter was that it was extended in space. Descartes' defining matter via the geometrical notion of extension played an important role in furthering the scientific revolution by making mathematics part of the very structure of the world that physics describes. But Descartes' dualism of mind and matter posed famous problems, foremost among them the problem of how two radically different substances could interact with one another, as when mind perceives the material world or the mind-guided will sets matter in motion. Spinoza sought to solve this problem with a radical form of metaphysical monism. On Spinoza's view, there is really only one substance, God, with mind and matter being just modes or ways of appearing of this one God. This is not an anthropomorphic God. It is a conception of the divine as part of nature, not after the fashion of some crude animism or even a pantheism in which the God in nature is metaphysically distinct from nature. For Spinoza, God and nature are one. Spinoza's God is mind as well as matter, thus also a rational principle. Accordingly, Spinoza taught that all of nature was ruled by ultimately intelligible laws that determined all things in nature. Talk of law has multiple meanings here. In one respect, it expresses the thoroughgoing determinism that was a basic feature of Spinoza's metaphysics. When, in explaining his reservations about quantum mechanics, Einstein quipped that God does not play dice, it was surely Spinoza's God that he had in mind. But talk of law is also meant to express the intelligibility, in principle, of nature. When Einstein spoke the words now carved in the fireplace mantel of the faculty lounge in what was once the mathematics building at Princeton, the now oft-quoted words, "Subtle is the Lord, malicious he is not," it was again Spinoza's God that Einstein had in mind, a God whose laws are neither easy nor impossible to decipher. Radical metaphysical determinism was important to Spinoza for ethical reasons, for it minimized or eliminated from one's picture of the universe any role for purely voluntary action and for personal or individual moral responsibility. Such ethical implications of Spinoza's philosophy seem to have been especially important to Einstein. We've seen how in his private life, Einstein was capable of sometimes treating those nearest to him in cold and callous ways. One notices how often, at moments of the most intense personal moral crisis, Einstein's thoughts turned heavenward, as it were, away from the messy world of intimate human relations and out toward the stars, toward the contemplation of nature's secrets. It makes sense that Einstein found solace in a picture of the world in which his own personhood, with all that it entails, is lost in the immensity of the universe that is the object of the scientist's study. Already as a 19-year-old youth, Einstein wrote the following: "Strenuous intellectual work and the study of God's nature are the angels that will lead me through all the troubles of this life with consolation, strength, and uncompromising rigor." When Mileva was struggling with the decay of her marriage to Einstein in the decade after his miracle year of 1905, she probably didn't appreciate Einstein's uncompromising rigor. Sensitivity and tact would have been more helpful. But we gain important insight into Einstein's complicated moral character through appreciating the moral psychological impact of Spinoza's philosophy. Flight from personal moral responsibility in his most intimate personal relations and taking refuge in the rarefied intellectual world of physics are recurrent themes in the story of Einstein's life. If such behavior had to be rationalized, Spinoza could help. Insight of another kind comes from our stopping to note that we've just found Spinoza's philosophy playing equally fundamental roles in shaping Einstein's physics, Einstein's moral philosophy, and Einstein's theology. As has been said more than once, Einstein was an integral thinker, not a person of wholly separate parts. The physics, the moral philosophy, and the theology are all part of one package. The other thinker who had a great influence on Einstein's deepest metaphysical, moral, and religious views was Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, a student in the loose sense of both Kant and the Vedanta. We've met Schopenhauer twice before in these lectures, first when we discussed Einstein's love of music, and next in connection with Einstein's physics as a source for Einstein's deep commitment to the idea of separability, the principle according to which separation in space or space-time was sufficient to mark two physical systems as independent realities. Let's think about Schopenhauer's influence now, mainly from the point of view of theology and morality. Call to mind again what should now be well-remembered features of Schopenhauer's philosophy. From the marriage of Kant and the Vedanta, Schopenhauer evolved the view that a deep reality in which all is one is hidden from us by the veil of Maya, as he called it. On this side of the veil, nature appears to us individuated by the Kantian forms of space and time, Schopenhauer's Principium Individuationis. There are individual atoms and individual persons. Only aesthetic experience, music most of all, brings the chance of a fleeting glimpse of the unity on the other side of the veil. The moral implications of Schopenhauer's metaphysics were touched upon in Lecture 13, but let's draw them out more completely now. The picture is a subtle and complicated one. In all of our daily life, we find ourselves as separate individuals. Moreover, determinism reigns on this side of the veil of Maya, causality being one of Kant's a priori categories of the understanding. As in Spinoza's metaphysics, therefore, we are all the subjects of a strict determinism in our daily moral lives and relations with one another, with all that that entails about not just freedom, but also individual moral responsibility. Schopenhauer was famous for his aphorisms. One of the most frequently quoted, it's quoted by Einstein too, is this: I can do what I want, but I cannot want what I want. What Schopenhauer meant is partly that in daily life, on this side of the veil, my will moves me to act, but I am not the master of my will. I do what I do. End of story. Schopenhauer also meant that by yielding to a will over which I exercise no control, I leave myself open to the suffering that comes from the inevitable failure to fulfill the desires that are the product of my willing. That's how things are in our everyday lives. But at the same time, on the other side of the veil of Maya, in the realm of the deepest reality, all is one. On the other side of the veil, you and I are not separate individuals. We are integral parts of a social whole that comprises all of humankind. On this side of the veil of Maya, our radical separateness and the rigid determinism that rules our lives mitigate a sense of personal moral responsibility. But on the other side of the veil of Maya, where individual will is transcended, where we are all one, selfish and egotistical desires make no sense. On the other side of the veil of Maya, the suffering of any one being is the suffering of the whole, and the joy that I feel is felt by you as well. By the way, this all-encompassing whole on the other side of the veil includes animals as well as humans, which might explain not only Einstein's vegetarianism, but also Schopenhauer's famous love for his pet poodles. In Schopenhauer's picture of the universe, you and I and Einstein all live somehow on both sides of the veil, as separate individuals steered by blind fate in our everyday lives, and as part of an inseparable universal human community in a deep reality that the lucky few glimpse only now and then. But right there you have the tension and the puzzle that is Einstein the moral being. The Einstein who was deaf to Maleva's cry for love is the everyday Einstein. Einstein the humanitarian, the Einstein drawn to courageous acts of defiance by a transcendent vision of a world at peace. That's the Einstein who, violin in hand, strives to live on the other side of the veil. Mention of transcendence brings us to the other important part of Schopenhauer's legacy to Einstein. No other serious philosopher of the 19th century so stirred the yearnings of artists and intellectuals to seek a realm beyond the everyday and the personal. Schopenhauer's holding out the hope of larger purpose and greater truth was a key to his being the philosophical voice of alienated middle-class youth. That there was more to life than the getting and spending of bourgeois European humdrum was one of Schopenhauer's clearest lessons. There is a higher and a better. Seek it out. Central to Einstein's concept of cosmic religion is just this moment of transcendence. The divine nature before which Einstein knelt in awe was both Spinoza's triune unity of God, mind, and matter, and Schopenhauer's whole, beyond the veil of Maya, seeking which gave highest purpose to human existence. Physics and morality both aim for transcendence, whether in a unified field theory or in the moral unity of world government. Images of transcendence, awe, and mystery are not uncommon in Einstein's writings, but one might well be surprised to learn that they occur as frequently as anywhere else in his reflections on science. A good example is found in a widely read and often quoted credo that Einstein wrote in 1930, where he said the following: "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science." There's a lot of Schopenhauer in a passage such as this, which makes clear the fundamental unity that characterized Einstein's worldview. Both art and science draw from the same emotional source. A few years earlier, in 1918, in an essay in honor of Max Planck's 60th birthday, Einstein invoked Schopenhauer by name when he said that escape from everyday life is the motive drawing people to both art and science. And of Planck in particular, as an example, he said that the state of mind making possible the theoretical physicist's life and work is, quote, akin to that of the religious worshiper or the lover, the effort coming, quote, straight from the heart. In the next lecture, we'll discuss again the fears that Einstein's physics aroused in many religious people who wrongly worried about the slide from relativity in physics to relativity in morals. But here in the cosmic religion that Einstein derived from thinkers like Spinoza and Schopenhauer, we find a kind of religiosity immune to worries that reason and faith might pull one in different directions. The larger question of the relationship between science and religion has a long and vexed history, going back at least to the late 2nd century or early 3rd century, when in his treatise on the proscription of heretics, Tertullian asked his famous questions: what has Athens to do with Jerusalem? What concord is there between the academy, meaning Plato's academy, and the church? The story of Galileo's condemnation by the Inquisition in 1632 is perhaps well enough known not to require repeating here. Likewise, the still ongoing story of religious opposition to Darwin and evolution. But obsession with a few such episodes emblematic of conflict obscures a more complicated and complete history that by no means supports the view that conflict is inevitable and irresolvable. For now, just 3 snippets of history pointing to a very different view of science and religion. Science and religion getting along just fine, thank you. One of these features Isaac Newton, who wrote more on theology than on physics. His anti-Trinitarian views would have caused him lots of grief had they been more widely known during his lifetime. But as we saw in Lecture 4, it's Newton's theology that one must look to for the deepest roots of his commitment to a notion of absolute space that his physics didn't require. A second snippet of history features Michael Faraday, whose prominence within the small sect of dissident Presbyterians known as the Sandemanians did not prevent his achieving fame as the person who introduced the concept of the electromagnetic field into 19th century physics, from where it made its way into a central role in Einstein's physics. The third snippet features Arthur Eddington, a committed believer in the Quaker doctrine of the inner light, whose Quaker pacifism during World War I led him to sidestep military service, and so made him available to plan and lead the eclipse expedition in the spring of 1919 that confirmed Einstein's prediction of the bending of light near the sun. Many more examples could be collected of thinkers for whom reconciling science and religion was easy. Still, the presumption of conflict between science and religion is so strong in many minds today that we do well to dwell on the manner in which Einstein's physico-theology, if I can call it that, the manner in which Einstein's physico-theology premises not antagonism, but deep consonance and harmony between science and religious faith. In a genuinely spiritual sense, science is Einstein's faith and Einstein's religion. Such is the religion that Einstein had in mind when he wrote in 1940, "Science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind." Okay, yes, it's all too easy to fall into the trap of portraying Einstein as a universal genius, but indulge me for a moment as I conclude this discussion by suggesting that Einstein's theology of cosmic religion is worthy of more than just polite regard, and that it might have a significance going beyond what it contributed to Einstein's physics and to his moral outlook. Too many students of Einstein want to dismiss his comments about cosmic religion as throwaway remarks intended mainly to mollify the weak-minded, or perhaps as early signs of a late-life infirmity that was also seen in his opposition to quantum mechanics and his pursuit of a unified field theory program. But we've already talked about what's wrong with the senile old Einstein picture. And I think that Einstein was speaking from the heart when he talked about religion. Let's do Einstein the favor of taking what he said about religion seriously as a sincere expression of belief. And so let me ask whether Einstein's cosmic religion is worthy of study as an exercise in theology. Precisely this question is raised also by the distinguished historian of science Max Jammer in his 1999 book, Einstein and Religion. Einstein's cosmic religion would be much less interesting were it, as I said earlier, it is not just a variant of animism or pantheism. In no sense was Einstein arguing that God or gods are literally present in a physical nature from which he, she, it, or they is or are otherwise metaphysically distinct. Einstein's God is metaphysically identical with the nature it inhabits. The transcendent, the divine in Einstein's theology is nature itself, though not nature dissected, ready for study bit by bit in the laboratory. That would be nature on this side of the veil of Maya. Einstein's God is nature as a whole, especially from the perspective of the intelligibility in principle of the laws that lie at the heart of nature. In this respect, Einstein's concept of the divine bears comparison with the old Stoic notion of logos, the universal reason inherent in all of nature. Though Einstein's cosmic religion breathes a romantic spirit of transcendence, it is very much a rationalist's religion. Is it a contradiction in terms to speak of romantic rationalism? Einstein's religion would involve no clergy. Its only sacrament might be the moral communion of its members, in which respect it would resemble somewhat the ethical culture movement. There would be no prayer, no sin and redemption, no salvation, but daily reminders of the community of nations and peoples would reinforce kinder dispositions. Science would provide the scripture, the books of its Bible bearing names like first and second relativity. Its saints would include figures like Lorentz and Gandhi. Einstein himself would be its prophet. Would emotion have its place in such a church of the mind? Well, does love of the truth count? How about the awe and humility one feels in contemplating the cosmos? Einstein's mentor, Spinoza, was expelled from the Jewish community of his native Amsterdam in 1656 at the age of 23, presumably because his monistic conception of God, mind, and matter was viewed as heretical. Schopenhauer found himself drawn to Buddhism and the Indian Vedantic tradition rather than the German Protestantism into which he was born. The Protestantism, one of whose greatest interpreters was Schopenhauer's own teacher, the theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher. Einstein's cosmic religion would bear no closer relation to the major Abrahamic faiths than did the theologies of Spinoza and Schopenhauer. And yet it would be fair to say that Einstein thought of cosmic religion as a sincere expression of a religious impulse at the heart of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with all that is inessential and merely contingent stripped away. Einstein had no desire to found a church. But whatever his intentions, his work and his person became models and sources of inspiration for many proclaiming the gospel of modernity in a century heralded in by Einstein's miracle year. Einstein's broader impact in shaping the culture of the modern will be the focus of our next lecture.